Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Deployed Engineer channel. It's been a while. Finally got to the podcast. And I'm very excited today to have Shashank Nallabothu to the podcast. And he's a coworker. He's an applied AI and a forward deployed engineer at Addy AI. Shashank has a master's from University of Texas. He specialized in AI and data science. And Shashank helps me and like the team here, and we do some great AI work and in the mortgage space. And so today I'm super excited to have Shashank share his insights as an engineer, his journey, and what he thinks about the current trends and the excitement around what it is to be an engineer.
Thank you, Bhaulik, for the warm introduction. But yeah, as Bhaulik introduced, I'm the FDE at ADI working along with him. There's a lot of interest that I have right now at the point of the pace AI is going with. Starting off, been working with so much of document parsing and how things works, how the OCR works, building something around that, and then I'm always excited about evaluating the AI. So I've been working on the eval stuff so much around it, going into the weeds of how things work and where things break. The there's one theory that Pollock shared, which is like weak links theory, which I'm super excited all the time when I'm doing the evals to find those weak links. Like, what exactly are the weak links? Where can we have these weak links with the AI finding those patterns? So yeah, that's what I've been around from last couple of weeks.
Nice, nice. Yeah, a bit of background with the weak links theory is that if you cannot automate a system from end to end, you technically have not automated the entire process, and that leaves something called weak links. And that has when you look at the broader scale and the economy, the more if you even have like a small amount of weak links, it means that the weak links themselves have a high amount of leverage. And this is just proposed by an economics professor from Stanford. So anyone who's interested can just look that up. But it's interesting how that plays out in the AI world. So Shaki is helping us figure out those weak links in the, by doing the evals. So that I think that's why evals are super, upcoming space in AI. Yeah, like we could talk more about that, Shank. So what do you like, about the evals process? Like, how do you think about evals and why are they important?
So I mean if we start with the evolution of AI or all these agents, it was mostly around chat bots and a chat screen where you can have some interactions. But we have crossed way beyond that in last couple of months, where it's more about AI agents doing so much of background work, doing so many tool calls in the background, which led the evals process to be beyond just a chat interaction to see, oh, what's the answer it returned, what's the question that was asked. But it went way beyond that. That's one thing we have to understand about evals. And most of the people try to automate evals too, which is not a good process. But the grunt work of evals is to always go verify each and every call of what AI is doing and what your customers need. I think the first important thing of evals of anyone trying to achieve evals is they have to understand the product that they're building. So it's always subjective to the product. Like, AI have millions, trillions of pages of knowledge. It can only be evaluated based on your use case. It's very subjective. So the first step I would say of evals is definitely understand the product, and the second step would be to do it manually, like grade your evals, annotate your evals manually. That's a time taking process, but I would always appreciate doing that for a longer benefit of how your product is working.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think like there's a temptation to just let AI go with the vibes all the time and then build a product. But having worked with this system for a long time now, I would say, about 3 years, I would say that very confidently that when you tell it to fix something, necessarily it cannot go and simulate every possible edge case. It can try and get to that 80%, but a lot of times to really build something that is really usable and is able to handle those edge cases, it's important to do the evaluations. And I think part of that is a lot of the manual work. So you have to put away the automation that you have at hand, which is so powerful, and you have to sort of step back and now do all the labeling and build the LLM as a judge, which and sort of make sure that you're not introducing AI biases in your outputs, because it could produce an indefinite amount of outputs given an input, and like how do you make sure that that output is definite, right? And I think that's where I think we've sort of partnered and really make sure that the quality of the product is great when you introduce AI into a system, and you do that by doing evaluations, right? So I think I totally understand that part. Besides that, like what do you think is like interesting today as an engineer that was not there, like let's say when you're doing your masters, like what do you think has changed, and how should people maybe pursuing their masters or still studying think about it, given that you're in the current shoes you are in?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, which reminds me of my master's days. That I remember having a project which is a full stack project. It's literally some management system, like conferences management system where you can submit all your papers and stuff. And people were going nuts to build it. They're going to Chat GPT, asking, give me a front end code, and it gives you like one first page, first landing page code. You copy it, paste it back to the Visual Studio. Cursor was in the early stage, they're in the beta stage, not super famous and all. So during those days, I remember the struggle I have faced, understanding all these things, making it live, a full stack project from end to end, making it live and submitting it to my professor. But today the same thing can be done maybe in like 2 hours using the AI tools we have. That's the biggest change that I have. The biggest change that I have seen is that one part. I recall too, like even from the GPT 4.4 4.0, when the GPT launched 4.0, the real agentic tasks started having some real use case to implement and all these things. But it's really great. And also thinking of how, like, even not just going so long, even if I go back like 2 3 months ago, there was no loops. There was this is some interesting concept that was that was having some traction on the internet, which is loops. So I was just looking around it, and I was thinking so much. Like I spent the whole weekend on the loops to understand its use case, and I was like, this is not working. And then all of a sudden, I was given a task in at Addy while we were working, and I instantly realized, oh, maybe let me try loops, and all the trial and error methods and everything that really helped me to achieve, crack down a problem. So, and also loops help you to focus on something else. When you have some manual repetition of works happening all the time, you can just put a loop on and switch to other task. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I think it's a lovely topic there. Loops has been the most trending topic right now. And I've started using it myself to automate certain things, but you seem to be very good at this. Can you share with us some examples of, loops that an engineer today can leverage to upskill, to really upskill or like do better work when they're using AI for coding? Like, what are some patterns of using loops?
I would keep it in like one sentence. If I have to say, where do I use loops, I would keep it in one sentence. When you have so much of work going on, like trial and error work that's going on, that you have to try 100 combinations to come to a decision, loops is one place where you can use loops. And there's so many other use cases that it's very much, we like, let's say you're having a constant bug you ke- that keeps occurring. So you run a loop and see the pattern. So it's, and also like, the pattern observation is where loops work. So if we go a little behind how loops work, it's basically literally they create a timer inside your manual computer or your virtual computer, and it triggers every time, every 1 minute or whatever the time you said. It's like a cron job that works, but it can think your cron job. Every time it runs, it's fresh. But this loop is a little different, so that it has always context of where I stopped, where am I at, or what's my goal. So a goal oriented is where loops actually work. So you have a goal. Okay, this is my goal. Let me achieve this, and you give that goal to the loop. It loops, and till the point it achieves the goal, the loop runs. Talking about the tokens, there, the downside is definitely you'll be spending so many millions of tokens. I was looking at my stats the other day while I was running a loop. I ran the loop for almost half a day, and I burnt like 100 million tokens. That's insane level of tokens. But yeah, it's you have to manage both. But yeah,
Yeah, I think as the cost of tokens will come down with the newer and newer models, maybe there's a world where you could leverage loops to you could leverage loops without worrying too much about exploding costs. Okay, so loops are essentially like they're sort of cron jobs that allow the AI to keep running after every interval, right? And then it does certain work and checks against the outputs. My question is like, why does it have to be interval based? Like, can't it just like run something, check something, run something, check something? Would you consider that as a loop, or does it have to be necessarily time bound?
it's not necessarily time bound. Like I said, you can have multiple use cases. Let's say you're running some you're trying to test a data set, which the data set runs for like 1 hour, or let's say you're training a data set, or you're fine tuning a model, and the fine tuning of it takes like 1 hour. So what, before loops, let's see how the same use case was before loops. Before loops, you were like, you run it, you analyze the logs, or let's say you copy the logs, paste it back to the AI, so that AI regenerates its context, and then, oh, you see this. But the problem here is, at least for this use case, you context switch so much. Like, you're working on this, so you put a data set that's training, and it's taking 1 hour, so you forget about it, you switch to a different task. And now you come back to this task, and it takes a little while for you to understand what's happening, and then you paste it back to the AI to reanalyze and understand where's the improvement scope. So this is the story how it used to be before loops. But coming to after loops, like, let's say your data set takes 1 hour, which your AI agent knows, okay, it's taking 1 hour, so let me create a cron job within me, that I can wake up after 1 hour and check what's happening, and it can iterate unlimited times.
I see. So when it's already executing, does it like, because you're saying like it will wake up after 1 hour, so essentially it does some work which might not need supervising for a little while. So it just sets itself off to wake up at a certain interval just to check whether the work is done and what it's done, and then iterate on its work. Whereas before, we had to prompt it and then come back and resume and tell it what to do. I think now it's like, okay, the loop allows the agent to like come back and check its work at a certain point in time and then go off.
So the biggest thing with the AI agents having all this ability is, we all think we're getting less work, but it's actually we're doing more work. So we're working on five different things parallelly. So the context switching has become an issue with humans. So these loops help you not to context switch, so that AI agent is always running in the loop. That's the biggest reason why loops exist.
Yeah, I love that take. I think it makes so much sense, right? It's like a lot of the work is just like trying to remember what you were doing in a certain chat and just going back and trying to and being like, oh yeah, this is where this thing was at and this is where I'm supposed to check its outputs from. And I think it becomes very overwhelming to just keep track of that. So I think I like the framing of having the loops to monitor itself and check itself after a certain point. So I think that's fair. Besides loops, are there any like recent things you've learned that weren't that useful, I guess, or weren't there at all as a usage pattern, especially in AI when it comes to doing your work?
Apart from loops, anything useful? Is that the question?
Yeah, in the past 6 months. Yeah.
Apart from loops, I think the choice of using your, so I'll give you a little context. So I use Cursor. I'm not stick to one thing. Like, oh, let's say Codex has just GPT models, and Claude has just Claude Anthropic model. So Claude Code. What I use Cursor, which is my preference. And before 6 months, I was like, I just used to use just one model on Cursor all the time. But I was thinking, oh, what can be a difference that we can actually we can improve the speed and everything. Then I was exploring different models in terms of speed, in terms of latency per prompt, analyzing things. So now I have a model. Okay, oh, this is a front end model that I use. But inside front end model, let's say it's a quick change which doesn't need a lot of thinking, or let's say I need a quick change, I need a hot fix that should go into the production. I pick a particular model in front end which can do the work quick. And now I have a front end model where I'm building a dashboard from scratch. I have a different model. And there is something else apart from that. Same for the backend. You have to manage your backend. So for database operations, I have one. So that and for some other API calling and API endpoint, I have a different model in the backend. That's one thing. And also the other thing is, even before I prompt, I always plan. So one good thing with the cursor and all the AI tools, these AI coding tools, is they have a plan mode, which is the most important thing, according to me. And what plan mode gives is a better understanding of you. What might AI do in the later phases, instead of you understanding every thinking trace. So there's a lot of thinking traces going on, and you have to put your eyes scrolling, and it never ends. But if you already have an existing plan, this is what I need to build, AI is on point to follow it. So these two things, having choosing a better model and then having a plan.
Yeah, I like that. Are there any particular models you're using to improve your design work? It seems like AI is very lacking and has this characteristics of showing itself, revealing itself, right? But as humans, we're very sensitive to visual things, and most of us are now able to tell this is AI slop in terms of design, and you could tell that this was something that there was some thought behind, there was some human touch, right? How do you refine your work to sort of be more aesthetic?
Every time I have this unique approach of following one thing, which is I have my portfolio website, which Bhaulik, you can add screenshot of it in the later stages. But I have my
Okay.
portfolio website, so I always had a thought and a theme for that portfolio website. So every time a new model comes in, I try to test that model's front end capability to see if it can ever match my understanding of theme and my way of representing the website. If I were to build it from scratch, this is how it will be. So I always try to explain the models, and I've tried from almost Opus 4.6, if I'm not wrong, and on the other side, parallel with the GPT models and the open source models, I've tried till Opus 5. So before Opus 5, there was like literally zero models which had the ability to represent what I had in mind. I'll give you a little more context. My portfolio website is more of a drawing sketchbook representation. So I wanted a motion graphics kind of scroll where the book scrolls. You know how the book flips. I wanted something like that. And till GPT, even GPT 5.6, which is their frontier version, which is almost as capable as Fable, was not able to do that. But I see Opus right now being improved. So that's how I evaluate a few of the models. To if I got your question right, that's how I evaluate the models before choosing it. At least for the front
I
end
love
part.
that. I think it's yeah, I see. It's like an original way of doing evaluations. You're doing it not based off what you're just reading, but just doing it based off the kind of benchmarks that you set for yourself. And I think in your case, it's using a personal website and doing a flip book, which I'll share the link for those who want to, view that. But you tend to see the evolution of the performance of the models based on a baseline task that you set for yourself personally, and you sense and feel. It's almost like tasting food, almost, and seeing like, oh, okay, like if I add this ingredient, if I use a different thing, like how is it turning out? And so
Exactly.
I think that's a great way to really
I
do a
think
benchmark rather than just being, yeah,
the
yeah,
intuition behind
continue.
this is, even if you look at any, let's say GPT launched a new model, they compare it with, can it build a tic tac toe game, can it build some kind of, they compare it. But all these are predetermined. They were in on the data set, the data set they were training, it's always there. It's not like rocket science. I mean, it's there isn't a lot of thinking behind it. You don't have your personal touch attached to that game or something. But when it comes to your personal websites, that's where your personal touch comes in, and the actual evaluations should be comparing with your personal touch versus the implementation. So I see. I mean, there were a lot of models coming up from last 6 months, which didn't impress me with the front end, but Opus 5 definitely was able to achieve. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it was able to replicate some part of what I was expecting.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. I think I like that. Maybe, most of us should go and do that, spend a few hours playing with them and then on one project and seeing the evolution of that. So it's a good approach there. So you've been in a sort of a tough market when you graduated and you saw the AI coming through. You've really like you're a really good engineer, and you've seen like your fair share of like difficulties when it comes to like getting your first opportunity. And then now it's like you sort of see the pattern of like how you could actually get a good opportunity like Addy. So what's your tips and tricks to graduates who are looking for jobs, who are great at what they do and they're passionate about things like yourself? What are some things you advise them in this time when there's difficulty and there's a lot of competition and there's layoffs out elsewhere, and you have to just stand out in different ways to get the job? Like, what's your tips for people?
I think the most important part is like the mindset. Like you have to have the mindset of, I mean, I wouldn't say like a hard mindset of working for 18 hours, like grinding yourself. That's not the mindset, but you have to be little bit looking at what's happening in the industry. So there's always some. I came up with this concept of low hanging fruits. So I was also trying to get some Fang, trying for Google, trying for Amazon. I was trying everything I can, and I was like, when I look back, I was like, oh, I know nothing because I'm trying everything. So then I came to this. I read it somewhere, like there's always low hanging fruits in the market, which should be your target. So I was looking at the market stats and saw that, oh, there's a huge gap in this AI space, specifically in this FDE space. So this forward deployed engineer was never existed. If you look at 2 years ago, there's never a concept of forward deployed engineer. Maybe Palantir had some kind of implementation towards it, but it's just one or two companies. It's not famous, but every company, if you go and look at the LinkedIn stats, the most the most growth rate in terms of role expansion is towards FDE. So I was like, okay, let me see what FDE skills I would have to improve. Let me focus on this and understand what's their requirement. And it comes out to be like, oh, it's just software work with an addition of being more communicative, understanding being in a product mindset, being a product person. That's one of the most important skill I've learned in my journey. Like I can give you an example of how hard the market was. I have applied for more than 3,000 applications during my job search, and I was definitely working for a different firm as representing them, trying to build something from scratch. But I've constantly applied to get something that I like, and it came out like 3,000 applications. The conversion rate is point. I only gave 10 interviews, and if you look at the conversion ratio, it's point not 3 or something, if I'm not bad at math, but the conversion ratio is definitely less. So the time you spend on applications is not worth it. You have to find a different approach. Everyone is hitting the same thing. We have now, with AI agents coming in, everyone is trying to automate their application process, which eventually the HR see this AI slop that's coming in, and they're like, oh, let me look into my circle or my colleague circle to get someone in. So the mindset should be to try something out of the box. That if you see 90 people trying the same thing, at least don't try what all 90% or 90 people are doing. Try what the 91st person is not doing, or try what the 90 people are not doing.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people think that you can just like slap a resume together and just spam all the employers and get a job. And I think there was a world where it was working, but at times changing, I think you need to first of all, you need to be aligned to the kind of work that people are looking for, right? And part of it is AI, part of it is just being good at something very specific, because AI is already doing a lot of the base level work. So if you just put like some like React developer, I think just something, very plain, I think it's getting harder to just get a job doing something like that. It's almost as if people are expected to be more product oriented or all rounders in some sense to really stand out to get that first gig. And I think, yeah, I love your theory on, you call it low hanging fruits, right? Expand on that, like how do you think about it? Because I think there's a temptation to avoid or totally neglect low hanging fruits and try the difficult things, right? But it's all I do see myself also having applied that in different ways. But what do you think about that? Maybe you could expound on that a little more.
I mean, it's a very simple concept. Like, let's say we go to a farm and we see a tree having a bunch of mangoes or some fruit, some kind of fruit. You always try to get the one which is like the nearest possible, like which is which is as close as to your height or to your hand that you can reach. So that's the low hanging fruit concept. But elaborating it of what my intuition was towards it is, I went into the AI space. Like, there was so much going on in the AI space, and everyone is clueless. Everyone is clueless. So I started projecting myself that, okay, I started projecting, okay, this is what I know. I've been sharing a bunch of things that I know, and I see people started respecting me, or that, oh, he knows more about AI. He knows more about AI. That's when I figured out that, okay, there is. I thought everyone know this, but the truth is, like, everyone, not every, like most of 90% of my followers who were seeing my posts that I was posting about sharing the AI knowledge, the AI agents knowledge, they were all introduced to it first time, reading it for the first time, or reading it, actually understanding it for the first time, instead of, I would say, not reading it but understanding it for the first time. I was amazed. Okay, so what my assumption towards AI is wrong. Everyone is clueless right now. So the experienced people are already in the comfort zone of not moving away from their, from their current role, and the newcomers are trying for the same roles which experienced person are not willing to come out. Let's take the example of SDE, software developer engineer, or some kind of data analyst. I've seen a lot of my friends who were trying for data analyst jobs. I wouldn't say data analysis is dead, but the space is filled. And people who are trying to transition from, people are not willing to move away from the data analyst jobs who were already working there for 10, 15 years. So there is already a space that's filled, and you're trying for the same thing, which causes so much of chaos for you to break the interview, get a call. You apply for 10,000 applications for a data analyst just to see you're the last person the HR wants to pick because you have less experience. If you're just graduating, your experience is definitely less compared to the person who is applying. So the best way, the best place to apply is where people are not willing to move. Because you're starting fresh, you can always learn anything new, which an experienced person cannot do. We all assume experienced persons, oh, they know everything, but the truth is they're so comfortable with the repetition of work that they have been working over last 10 years. It's hard for them to transition than a newcomer coming out of masters or bachelors to learn a new thing. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
love
I,
that
I
take.
started learning. I
It's
started
Yeah, continue.
so yeah, I understood that market gap and started exploring, started building so many of my personal projects, and then got an opportunity, to build something for a bigger client. I was working for I was representing a consulting firm, and then building something for a big insurance company in America, and all these opportunities led, and I didn't have much experience before that or after that, but I was still respected because I was able to achieve something. So the concept of experience might give you an extra edge, but end of the day, it's always valued of you building a product. That's the reason why I always say be a product person rather than a skill based person.
Yeah, that's true. I think engineers are like getting closer to now the places where the product is used or how the product should be shaped versus before where you could sit behind the silo, like if being a forward deployed engineer is like going into some of those customer calls and then figuring out the issues and going back and improving the product, finding insights into them, correcting the problems that you notice, right? So, what are some resources you continually use to keep yourself up to date and learn? Are there any influencers you follow? Are there any social networks you're like constantly looking into to keep yourself going?
I mean, if I have to start about the day I started learning about these AI agents and everything, there was a person who I've been following from last 7 years, from which I've learned machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, every possible field in the AI through his courses. And then he started teaching AI agents, which is the day I realized, okay, he's teaching AI agents. Okay, this is something that's important as me being someone who's trying to break into data science or who's trying to build some machine learning algorithm. I realized that's the point. I realized that. I would like to share his name. He's like Krish Nayak. I think he's very famous on the internet, at least for people who are into this. At least I would say the Indians who are into this machine learning. Everyone have some idea who he is, but he's one person, and the other person I always follow is Andrew Ng. He's like the god of AI for
Universe.
me, at least. I always try to the Andrew Ng guy, deep learning, the deep learning. I think he's the founder of deep learning, but Andrew Ng is always on my LinkedIn. I always try to see what's his building, what's his going to. Sharing a new thing, interesting fact with that is when I remember open source getting a little traction, not now, but when Meta Llama was launching few of their models, and I wasn't paying much attention, but when Andrew Ng was doing evals for the GPT 20 billion and 120 billion model, I realized, okay, open source is something important. If not, Andrew would not spend time to get this model into live. That's when I was like, okay, let's look into what's this open source model and how these work. Can we even take use of it? It's been like it's more than 1.5 year when GPT 20 billion was introduced, but it was one of the introduction where I started following so many open source articles, not just for the models, but also for the context management, for memory management, every possible thing. Open source is the answer. Like there is nothing in the there is I would say there is you can find everything in the open source if you have some peace of mind to and some patience to look over. You'll find almost every possible thing.
Favorite open source model right now?
It's hard. I don't know. I've used like GLM 5.2, which was top talk of the town like 2 months ago, but it didn't really impress me with the coding tasks or the kind of work that I'm doing. But I think they came a pretty long way. I can see they are like 1 year behind the current frontier models, but even 1 year before, if you ask me, are you amazed with the kind of models that GPT is releasing a year ago? I was, yeah, obviously, because it was able to do the coding tasks, it was able to achieve a lot of things, was able to do a lot of tool calling and all these things. I was literally amazed by the work even 1 year ago. So open source is still always a go-to thing, but open source is also getting so super competitive between Kimi, GLM, and all these things. But Kimi seems to me a little choice because of its front end work that it can do. The reason why I always say front end has so much of thinking that goes in that you have to put in place. Back end, definitely it's the hardest thing to build, but front end is what have the personal touch. Back end is all rule based approach that you have, like you read hundreds of books, you become master in back end. But front end is more like a user perspective, which I feel it's the biggest weak link between AI and human. If you ask, can AI ever replace human? This weak link of having a human touch is what is missing, and which can prove that this weak link is getting shorter is the front end thinking of how it's coming up with the structure. That's one reason why I'm a little edgy towards Kimi 3.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think they're just, yeah, the fact that they're solving that piece which the rest of the models aren't doing so well is what impresses you about Kimi. What do you think will happen to software development in the next 5 years? Like, what are some of your intuitive predictions without, having the burden of being right? Assuming you had to make a wild guess, what do you think will happen?
I think software still exists, that's for sure. Like let's say we got there. I was always in this in this fear like a year ago of what might happen to software. Am I losing my job? Am I not worth it? Did I spend all last 7 years of my life just wasting my time? Should I have focused on something else? I was always in this constant doubt like a year ago. Then I attended a Google conference in LA last year in December, and there was an interesting keynote by one of the leading persons in Google, where he shared a story of how cars evolved. So they were always before the cars. It was always the horse riders and all these blacksmiths who actually used to lead the transportation transportation field. And when cars evolved, they're like, oh, we're losing our jobs. Everyone is worried, and there's so much of chaos during that time. It's a bigger invention than what AI is right now, because transportation, communication between two people is through transportation in 1900s. So people were worried that, oh, they're losing their jobs. But on another note, so he shared a story on I don't exactly remember the years, but there was a certain year in 1900s where car was introduced, like a car was introduced, and it's just been 1 year. People started buying cars, and there is a New York parade that always happens during the New Year. And he shared a picture where there were 99 horse, the blacksmiths, and just one car. And 10 years down the line, there's zero horses and 900 cars. But this 10 years of journey of where blacksmiths adoption is the most important part. So did they lose their jobs? No. But did they lose their jobs? Yes. But their jobs were converted from one form to other form. Like, he was a if we talk in layman terms, he is a person who transports you from one place to other place. His job is still there. He can still be a driver, but the only thing he need to do is learn the skill of actually how to drive a car. But most important part is the traffic rules are the same, the roads are the same, everything is same. So the easiest thing is, the easiest person who can learn driving is the blacksmith, not the individual person who just was introduced to the car. So we have to come into that mindset of, okay, my job is not being lost, but I definitely have to learn what's happening in the AI field. I definitely should know how to manage AI agents, how can I use the AI agents, and all these things. And there was also an interesting, like, for the question you asked, I would say 90% of the work would be done by AI, and only 10% of the work that will be actually done by humans. I mean, I wouldn't say like, there is an interesting question I asked, like, 15 people in my circle who are actually working in big firms. They were working in Google, they were working in startups. I asked everyone, when was the last time you declared a whole function with your hands? And everyone is like, oh, it's been months. I wrote it on my own. I was just prompting. So your form of writing code changed from writing the function to prompting the AI. But so the claim of 90% of work being done by AI is includes writing code and also making decisions of what your product might need. The 10 is where you're going to stand out. The 10% of personal touch is where you're going to stand out of how your product versus you, your competitor, or you, your other employee. That's where the 10% is always going to exist.
I see. Yeah, I think I love the blacksmith analogy. The modern engineer is like the blacksmith in those times, I would say. And using the agents is like learning how to drive the car rather than riding horses, which is writing code, manually. I think when people say coding is dead, I agree with that. Because the idea is you're not really writing the code, but you're still responsible for the outputs that the code generates. I also think there's a lot of like system level things that you have to think about that you innately know as an engineer. And maybe AI will keep getting better at it, but having an engineer in the loop allows the people using the system to have a lot more confidence when they're using it, because they know there's a pilot still in the plane. There's still a pilot, even though the pilot is flying. The plane pretty much flies 80%, 90% on autopilot. There's reasons why there's still people there. If you I was reading up on how the F jets, F-35, and like all the big fighter jets work. And apparently those jets, I didn't know this, but the pilot doesn't even do the takeoff. It's the AI that does the takeoff, and the AI that does the landing, and for the most part the AI that does the flying as well, because a human cannot fly it at that. The way it's built is a human cannot just fly it, right? So you're able to like get to these parts of the physics that a human cannot get to if you use some of this automation. And I think that's what's happening now with the software world, is building these fighter jets, right, in some way. And you're still, as an engineer, still there as an engineer, and like as a pilot, there's still a person there, but you're trusting you could do more things now when faster. So I like that analogy. Okay. So let's say you're to rewind, and a lot of people going into tech to learn tech now. I don't know what to call it. There's a debate between if people should learn how to code or like computer science, and whether should pivot to other industries. What would you do? Let's assume you're here, you've given all this knowledge, you rewind your age and you go back to school and you have to make a choice. What would you do?
I would go for farming, Bhaulik. But jokes aside, it's really important that we the computer science is not being dead, but it's being transformed. Like an energy being transformed from one form to another form, computer science is in its phase of being transformed. So should I choose computer science? Definitely yes. Should I still learn how to write a syntax? Probably no. But should I know how a database works, how a product works? We visit hundreds of websites in a day, if I'm not wrong. We're always on our phones consistently. We're always on our laptops visiting every possible website. Always understand always have a question, how does it work, and start from there. How does it work, and learn every possible concept of how this thing works. Like you'll have a tree of how that works, and start from the bottom of the tree. Okay, this is where I have to start. Do you have to learn? You should you don't have to learn how to write the code, but you have to understand the concept of how to build it, or at least how it's working. What's the steps that takes place, what's the architectural decisions that happens between different websites. Like there's one interesting thing I always talk about is there is YouTube and there is Netflix. And if you look at the system design of Netflix and YouTube, it's completely different. Netflix have a control of how many videos it needs to get uploaded. So the system design of Netflix works different from YouTube, because YouTube, you or me, any random person can go and upload a video, which is a different system design decision, architectural decision. So what's important is we have to understand that it's very subjective of how things work. So how will you know all these different things? Is just by learning. Just understand how it's working behind the scenes, and that would transform the way you start your career. If you're starting your career. But definitely, even if you're just starting to learn code and everything, you don't have to remember your syntax. But there's also this one thing that I always share is you should have the ability to read the code like you read a book. When you're reading a book, let's say your native language is not English, and you read an English book. You don't translate every possible word into your native language and understand what's happening. You just read it in the flow and understand what's exactly happening. So you have to replicate the same behavior of how to read the code, and for that you definitely have to learn the syntax, but you don't have to remember the syntax. That's the difference. So reading a function, this is what the function returns, this is what's happening inside the function, is the most important skill I would give to freshers.
Achu. So they should be able to like learn how to read the code, but they should all understand importantly the fundamental constructs of what builds the code, so that they're able to learn and review that code. Maybe there's a world where the agents get really good at reading that, and then you're just there to make sure it works, like from a product sense. But I agree with the system design as well, which is you have to know from a top view what system design is. It's almost like saying you have, let's say this is AI that can do anything, assuming really well, anything, no errors, and you just told it to go and build a plane or something that can fly. It can just build anything, right? But that wouldn't really necessarily mean that you will get a plane that is optimized to what you want. So you have to think that, okay, I want a plane that's fuel efficient, that can fly long range, that can carry this much of weight. You have to still put in your needs, right, in a very concise way. And I think system design is that. If you know system design, you know how to direct that system, which can do anything to build what you want. But if you just don't know what a plane is in the first place, or what constitutes a plane, then your AI or robot cannot just make things up, And I think that's where that's how I frame it myself. And yeah, the YouTube versus Netflix, fundamentally different thought processes, right? When it comes to building the architecture and then driving the implementation to get to that outcome or architecture. And yeah, and I guess like the agents are good at the implementation as well. They can help you brainstorm the architecture, and I think, but you still have to define that and understand. I believe so. Yeah, great thought there. Okay, so we're towards the conclusion. Do you have any last tidbit to share while we get toward the end of the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, accept the AI, trust the AI. AI is definitely going to improve. AI is. I know there's a lot of things happening. Oh, AI bubble is going to burst. Anything can happen, but AI is not going to be dead. There was a .com bubble, but the websites are still active today. So there might be some decline or decline in terms of investments and all this, financial things. There it might affect, but the usage of AI is definitely going to be there. Always try to adapt to what's coming in new. You don't have to learn every day, but spend 1 hour in a week to see what's happening new. Learn a new skill. It's end of the day, you're not learning a Java. Java is so hard. People say Java is so hard, and you had the capability to learn Java syntax. It's definitely easy to learn what's happening in AI. It's way more easy because you're talking in your comfortable language. You're prompting it. So I would definitely suggest, yeah, to not have two minds of, oh, there's AI is not going to be the replacement. It's not a replacement, but definitely you have to be cautious of what's happening. You have to always constantly improve your learnings towards AI.
Perfect. I think that's a great closing thought there. Thanks for sharing that. So, yeah, we're toward the end of the podcast. Thank you, Shashank. Lots of things I learned today. We talked about so many different ideas. I hope people learned something from this. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.